Welcome to the owners panel at the ET Travelworld Virtual Summit. We have a very distinguished panel, and over the next 45 minutes, we will be discussing the point of view of the hotel owners in this travel and hospitality ecosystem. Let me introduce my panel to everyone. We have Sanjay Sethi, who is the MD and CEO of Chalet Hotels. We have Omar bin Jung, who's the MD of Hospitality at Prestige Group. We have Ashish Jhakanwala, who's the MD and CEO at Sami. We have Rahul Chaudhary, who's the MD and CEO at CG Group. And we have Vineet Verma, who's the Executive Director and CEO at Brigade Hospitality. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for giving us your time. Let's begin with Sanjay. Sanjay, can you start by telling us, and this is a question to the whole panel, which is that what is the role, we've been hearing from operators and then they stopped talking because they didn't want to say anything about what was going on. So we went all over the place trying to get sources. Now everyone has woken up and have started talking about it. So what is the situation for the ownership point of view? What have you guys been doing as owners with your operators to increase? I mean, now that hotels are opening up in certain parts of the country slowly. So what is the way forward? What are you doing now?
So Bikram, thank you for that question. I think, look, we as far as business is concerned, owners and operators work side by side in doing what needs to be done. And clearly in this situation of crisis, we worked and in tandem to look at various aspects of the business. Obviously, the first step was health and safety of our associates and our guests in the hotel. A second thing was all about sort of ensuring that the cash flows are robust enough, our cash flow planning is robust enough to take us through this crisis for at least 4 quarters, and then working on a revival plan. So that's what we've done together. As you know, the P&L, the balance sheet sits with the owner side of the business, and therefore the impact is a lot stronger for ownerships in this situation. But, we worked closely with the brands. We work with Marriott and Accor in our portfolio. We've taken advantage of their global knowledge, the fact that we were able to get an early mover advantage, both on health and safety front, as well as on a risk mitigation front from a financial perspective or business perspective, I think has been an advantage. And we are leveraging that advantage to make sure that as we open up and come back to the new normal, we do so with a larger market share.
Ashish?
So Bikram, I think the way our response is graded into 3 categories. There are certain steps we've taken which are immediate, but we will also be interim, which means that we obviously see a complete dissipation of businesses for the short term. And there are steps that one needs to take for that period of time to, of course, ensure, as Sanjay mentioned, both the safety and security, but also business continuity. The second category of steps that we are working with our operators is what we call medium term. And they will remain in force till such time there's not a full recovery of revenues. So while hotels will open, hopefully, hotels are actually open while the travel will resume, hopefully, but it'll still take a while before the revenues get back to, let's say, pre-COVID level. And there are steps which will remain in force till then. And then I think every event like this makes you challenge yourself, and there will be some structural changes that we will make with the business, which in our opinion will remain for all times, even when there is full recovery of the business from the current situation. So I think on other points, I completely concur with Sanjay. It's a completely symbiotic relationship. Our own view is that I think all of the operators we work with, which is Marriott, Hyatt, and Continental, it's been a fairly constructive dialogue with them over the last 3-4 months. I think a lot of people want to talk about, is there a disagreement or disalignment? Answer is absolutely no. We've seen all of these operators step up and do a fabulous job over the last 3-4 months. But I do think that owners have their job cut out for trying to put together a longer term solution to events like this, which hopefully will not happen to this severity, but there will always be sporadic cases and events like this which will disrupt the business.
Vineet?
See, as you know that we operate, we have 3 operators with us, 3 brands that we operate with, Marriott, Accor, and IHG. Accor continues to be our largest partner as of now. But having said that, the risk and reward of a hotel business belongs to us as owners. So the moment this situation arose and the crisis happened, the first thing we did was it was basically a 3-pronged approach that we as owners took. The first one was, of course, to make sure that, that while the business has gone down to nearly zero, how do we also control our expenses, particularly the fixed costs? So we sat down with each operator, and I must also compliment each operator that we have. They were very, very proactive on their own. They came forward on their own. So we jointly sat down, figured out ways and means of controlling our fixed costs. Secondly was how to safeguard our property in this crisis. And so that is where we sort of property related measures we took, again, together with the operators. Third was in terms of experiences going forward. How do we sort of work on the new norms that we can expect post-COVID? So we've been quite busy doing that. What is more important is something that an operator is unable to do, particularly international operators, because they do not have the wherewithal in India or the reach, is we worked very closely as owners with the state government. So we were working in very close conjunction with our tourism department, our chief minister, which are the areas where we can seek some relief and some support for the hospitality sector as far as the state government is concerned, whether it be property taxes, whether it be electricity bill. As you know that minimum demand charges in ESCOMs across the country. There are a huge number of minimum demand charges. How do we get a relief on that? We have these very expensive liquor license costs. How do we sort of get some relief on that? So that was another target that we as owners have been busy doing to try and get some relief. So we have been able to fortunately get some relief in Karnataka. However, across the country, unfortunately, we've not had much support, including from the center. But that's the way we've been busy so far, trying to balance the whole thing and get ready for post-COVID scenario. As of now, let's say from June 8th, our hotels have actually opened up, but each of them is on single-digit occupancy. And today also the business that we are getting is essentially quarantine business, because until domestic and international travel truly open up, you really cannot expect the real the sustainable kind of business coming into each of our hotels. Even whether it be our coffee shops or some of the restaurants that we've opened, we are very barely witnessing any footfalls at all because people are still reluctant to enter a hotel property. Despite whatever SOPs we have put in place and whatever assurances we give our customers, I think it's going to take some time.
Omar?
As hotel owners, we have and we wear multi-caps. The first one, of course, is the most important for us, which is our own cap. And we wear that as hotel owners, and how to protect an asset and how to manage the asset in good times, in trying times, and how to save for turbulence. The second part of our hat is to ensure that both our customers and our employees stay safe. And when they come to our hotels or they come to our assets, they are looked after well. And they are at minimal risk as we can. I don't think anyone can guarantee a zero risk in such times, but they are exposed to minimal risks. Our third relationship is, of course, with the brands. We work with 4 different brands. We work with Sheraton and Marriott. We work with Oakwood. We work with Hilton for Conrad, and we work with a resort of ours for Banyan Tree. So we've got, we also have the luxury of working in different asset classes. So we work in office spaces, we work in residential, we have malls. So all of this has a fair amount of learning that it brings to us. But having said that, this pandemic that has caught us off is absolutely off guard. We have no idea what the new norm is, where we need to look at, and when it's going to recover. We sit in air-conditioned rooms and in our ivory towers and we say, by third quarter, we will do 30% occupancy and the RevPAR will grow so much. But it's all hypothecation. With no certainty can anyone today in this room or in the hospitality industry say that this is the recovery plan and this is what we're going to do in the next quarter, the quarter after that, and 1 year from now, this is where we're going to be. I think therein lies the biggest challenge of trying to understand what this whole scenario holds for us. And I think it's very, very nebulous. We are, of course, like any prudent operator or any prudent owner, we are tightening our belts. We have taken certain social decisions where we've decided that we will have zero retrenchment of staff in any of our assets. And at the same time, we realize that the low down staff are the worst hit, so they get no pay cut. So I think, we are trying to do as much as we can, but at the end of it, there are certain resources. We are all limited by resources, but we feel that we would like to be best equipped when the recovery happens. We have opened all our hotels, they operate. For instance, Vineet was saying that, we're doing a great job in Karnataka with government intervention. We've opened all our restaurants, we can't serve alcohol. And I'm not really sure that people want to come and take the risk of just eating out as opposed to ordering in, as opposed to if they were to come and have a glass of wine or to have alcohol or so. So we've opened. It's disastrous opening, but we feel that A, it gives the people something to do in terms of our employees, and B, it helps us buck the trend when the upswing starts.
Rahul, tell us a little bit about.
Sure. Thank you, Vikram. And I think my esteemed panel already shared most of the points, but we also as CG Hospitality adopted a four-step strategy, I would say. Obviously, 3 months back when when the COVID obviously came into the forefront, our first response was the safety of our staff and safety of our guests, and the containment of the same to the extent possible. So we obviously had to take a full view in terms of all our operations, and obviously had to close it down. Unfortunately, there were some of the hotels, we are also owners and operators dealing in almost 12 different jurisdictions, 12 different countries. So the situation varies for us. So there were some situations whereby, unfortunately, some of the guests got stranded. And still till today, we have 3 rooms running in a hotel since 3 months. Unfortunately, the guests were stranded, and even the employees, we had to keep them in the hotel itself so as to contain the whole spread of corona. So the first step was safety of our staff as well as our customers. Second was the step we had to take in terms of cost rationalization, because at the end of the day, it's a survival mode that we are all working towards. So we had to obviously cut down costs to the extent possible. Our objective was always, as Omar mentioned, that our objective was also to see how we can keep the operations running to the extent possible, or to keep the staff also to the extent possible. Obviously, we had to cut down on the cost to the extent possible, but rationally, and in discussions with the staff itself. And that was the second step that we took. The third step was more in terms of revenue optimization, whereby we also had to think a little bit outside the box and also rethink our entire business strategy here in Kathmandu. I know it's not India, but in Kathmandu, I mean, we were the first ones to start home delivery from our hotels itself. And we kept the hotels running from the first day of the corona itself very successfully, and the F&B business was doing quite well. Similarly, there were many hotels in our portfolio which had legacy costs of, let's say, the payroll costs, for example. And because of the corona, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, we were pushed to a corner where we had to go into looking at retrenchments to the extent possible, because that was what was bringing our cost structures down. And number 4, now that we have engaged with operators, we have engaged with our partners, and we've come to a point whereby we've worked on a strategy for the next till at least March end, because I absolutely believe, as some of my panel members mentioned, that I don't think this is the end of the spread. I think there's going to be a second wave, according to me. So we have to be prepared for the worst, and we have planned until March end. But now all our energy is going towards working with the banks, with the government institutions, to try and get as much reliefs, as much packages as we can to survive in the long run. I think these are the steps that we have taken.
I think that's a very important point about getting some kind of relief or support. And at least in India, we aren't getting too much as far as the industry is concerned for something that is so crucial to the economy. And, unfortunately, in the mindset of a lot of people in our country, ownership is always considered little like a villain of the piece, which obviously it isn't. So you are anyhow stressed at one level. So what are you guys thinking is the strategy to go ahead? How do we revive this whole business? What is the kind of things that you would do as owners? Sanjay?
Yeah, so look, we worked diligently on working on a strategy. I think the first step was to try and get a sense of what the new normal will be like, and at what stages of this cycle are things going to normalize to the old normal. So with that in mind, we've looked at segmentation. There will be new segments that are going to emerge with this. We also believe there'll be a cycle to the segmentation, which means some segments will be relevant as we speak now for the next few months, which will then become irrelevant after some point of time. And there will be obviously the whole mindset of people that's going to emerge from post-COVID, which we need to address from a product and service offering perspective. So from that perspective, I think we are trying to see what needs to be done. Fortunately, as far as the room business is concerned, there cannot be a safer location than a hotel room right now, once you're in it, because you're in self-isolation over there in that room, right? It's the public areas that one needs to think about. I actually did a round of one of our hotels this morning, and they've already addressed all of that. So they've spaced things out properly. They've done sample settings for banquets, whether it's social functions or business functions, and those were set up for my review this morning. The restaurants have been reset, bars have been reset to ensure the social distancing norms have been maintained. I strongly believe, and I think Ashish mentioned this in our last conversation a few days back, that if you compare our hotel assets, compare them to the airports or railway stations, offices, malls, cinema theaters, standalone restaurants, I think there isn't a safer asset class than this. Number one, to begin with, I think the hygiene and sanitation standards have always been very good. And number two, we've been able to, as hotel owners and hotel brands, been able to pick up world's best practices and implement them very quickly and very early in the cycle. So those learnings, combined with the fact that our industry has always been very conscious of hygiene and health and safety, and the fact that we have spaces to space out our people and our guests and keep everyone safe and healthy. So that's one area. I think the next area obviously is on the revenue generation side. Bikram, we've had, as I mentioned, some segments that have emerged over the last 2 or 3 months. We've had one of our hotels which has been clocking 90% occupancies for the whole of this June so far. I mean, till yesterday it was clocking 90% occupancy. It's a large hotel. It's not a small hotel. But this has come out of segments which are not segments that will continue to be available after some time. These are not sustainable segments. And therefore, whilst we make the best of what's available now, we've got to think of going back and regenerating travel for the normal business traveler. And I do believe domestic business travel will come back before domestic leisure comes back, because it's more necessary in nature as a travel option. Also, companies and businesses need to do business. And somehow, in the recent weeks, we've getting feedback that working from home is not the same as it is working from office. They don't find the same level of productivity levels. They do not find the motivation level to be high enough when you work from home, especially after a sustained period of time. And even self-discipline tends to suffer when you're working from home. And so all of that combined together reflects on the productivity of the individual and therefore the company or organization that they work for. And therefore I see business travel will come back at some point of time, and people will go back to office in spite of all the information that we're getting regarding work from home.
Unless if you're a workaholic, working from home is not a good idea, because you don't stop.
It doesn't end. You leave office and there's a line drawn there, right? Some form of line. All right, you may have some calls, you may look at some emails, but in some form a line is drawn for that end of the day, a work day for you. And I think that's very necessary for sanity of everyone.
Ashish?
No, I don't think work from home is a practice which can last for long. Having said that, as hotel owners, we need to be aware of the fact that there are certain sectors which perhaps will start replacing some travel with technology. So I think we need to factor that displacement in our future analysis. How much, when I agree with Omar, it's all, taking our dart and trying to throw the dartboard. But I think we should be prepared for some displacement, at least in the short term. But that doesn't worry me, because if you see pre-COVID, Monday to Thursday, most cities in India demonstrated very, very strong demand for hotel rooms and little supply. So occupancy levels used to be really high between Monday to Thursday, which indicates that there is some capability for limited displacement in those markets in those days, right? And there will be continuous evolution of markets as well, right? So I don't think in the long term, Vikram, anybody is worried about demand. Corona hasn't permanently disable demand from any sector, from any source market. There will be interruption. I think all what we are trying to assess is how long that interruption will be and how to prepare ourselves best for that. I mean, for instance, I concur with Rahul that, I think it will be not prudent to say everything is going to be hunky-dory in August. You need to have a plan A, B, C, D. We clearly got hit by a plan Z, when COVID happened. So I think there will be, I'm not worried about long-term demand. Short-term, as I said, we need to remain fairly agile. We need to remain fairly flexible. I do think that, demand creation is an area where one needs to work really with the government and Ministry of Tourism. Why we need to understand that Indian cities only got business travel. We hardly had any domestic leisure going into large cities. So, Sanjay, I, Omar, Vineet, all of us have hotels in big cities where a large part of business used to come from corporates, and a reasonable part of that used to come from inbound international. We clearly understand that inbound international may be disrupted for a longer period of time. Unfortunately, in India, unlike the Europe or the Americas, we do not have a very strong domestic urban travel, which means unlike Europeans going to a London or a Paris for vacation, I don't think that phenomena is very strong about people going to Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad for tourism. I do think it's an opportunity for the government to kind of use this as a platform for selling urban tourism. And I think eventually that urban tourism was to be the holy grail for hotel success, because that will push your occupancies up to 85, 90%, because you'll get the weekends and the holidays filled up. So I hope that the government realizes that they need to do a lot more to excite domestic demand, especially for urban leisure, because that's where a large majority of capital is invested. That's where the displacement will happen in the near term from international business. So far, we really haven't seen much happen. Unfortunately, every time you talk about tourism in India, it factors around Buddhist circuit and religious tourism, and that's useful. It's absolutely useful, but I think we need to understand that there would have been no France if there was no Paris. There would have been no UK if there was no London. So you need to feed your gateway cities really, really well for the tourists to spread across smaller destinations. In India, I believe that we have taken an approach to start talking about smaller destinations before we talk about the gateway cities. So I do think all of us need to work with the state governments and with the Ministry of Tourism to let them know the importance of urban tourism into gateway cities. And that will work really well in the short term. And I think that will work really, really well in the long term.
I think it's a fantastic point you've made there. Vineet and Omar, both of you, Bangalore is a city which has got a lot of international guests coming in by its nature. So what are you guys going to be doing? What is the strategy ahead? And, in some ways, the engine has got seized. So to restart it is going to take a lot of effort, I think.
So to put it like this, from our point of view, see what we have done is we are looking at it from a short and a mid-term right now, because nobody can predict thereafter. So what we did was we asked all our hotels to do an exercise for us and prepare 3 scenarios for us over the next 1 year or 18 months at best. The conservative scenario, most likely scenario, and a best case scenario. So based on that, we are trying to sort of drive each and every hotel in getting business in. And we are targeting, let's say, even continuing right now, as you rightly said, Bikram, nearly 60% of our business, let's say a hotel like Sheraton Grand in Gateway, 60% of our business comes from international travelers. So that is something that is at least gone for some time, because until international travel really opens up. So what is the other alternative left for us? We are definitely targeting domestic travel. We're actually targeting staycations. I think most of our hotels are doing that. We're all promoting staycations, workations, etc. But what is more important is we are also looking at innovative ways of utilizing our spaces in the hotels. Because quite a few of our spaces are not going to be utilized for quite some time. Take, for example, the smaller meeting rooms. Because of these social distancing norms, the smaller meeting rooms are becoming redundant from a MICE point of view, MICE activity point of view. Banquet hall that could accommodate 300 people, as of today, accommodates only 50 as per government norms, which is a ridiculous rule according to me. But then going forward, let's say even if they relax it, we'll probably be able to accommodate only half the strength of the banquet. So MICE is affected long term. So our target essentially has been drive domestic travel, domestic business, drive F&B in an innovative way as far as possible. That includes takeaways, home deliveries as much as possible. Then it comes to the other areas of the areas that we feel can be used innovatively in an alternate manner. Take, for example, converting maybe some of our suites, executive suites, into office spaces and leasing it out to startups or consulates. So many options. Bombay has several examples like that. Similarly, for our smaller meeting rooms, can we make them into co-working spaces for a smaller group? So these are some of the things that we are looking at. The other thing which is picking up, and actually there have been a number of inquiries at the business continuity plan for these MNCs and IT majors. They are now thinking of housing a part of their critical staff close to the places where they are working. So to that extent, a campus like Brigade Gateway in Bangalore, it works well because you have a Sheraton Grand and you have the World Trade Center right next to it, which houses Amazon headquarters. So these are some of the options that we are exploring. But despite all this, we are still not expecting a great uptake on our business until the international travel really opens up. So that's the way, unfortunately, it is. And we see this not turning around. My personal thing is, estimate is about 18 months, that we will begin to see anything which is like pre-COVID levels. Yes. The other thing is a big question mark, Vikram, is the Aero Show. Now, Aero Show is going to be hosted again in February in Bangalore. That's confirmed. But now the jury is still out, whether the Aero Show is going to happen or not. It all depends on whether a cure is found for COVID-19 or a vaccine is out by then. Otherwise, most of these international participants may not be comfortable traveling to India. Right. So I think we have our fingers crossed. Let's see what happens.
I think Vineet has covered a lot of what I would have said, but see, we work in three different segments. We have one segment where we've got a service apartment. And those service apartments, we just can't have enough in times like these because people are just loving the whole concept of big rooms. Some companies are taking 3 bedrooms and using the living room as a workspace. So those, touch wood, are doing really well for us. Then the second part we have this resort just outside Bangalore, which is with banyan tree called the Angsana. And we find that now the people with so much pent up demand, they want to get away to some place which is convenient, but not too far away. And they don't have to deal with inter-border hassles of getting in, getting out, quarantines and so on. When you come to the main hotels, of course, the biggest hotels we have are the Sheraton as well as the Conrad. And those have huge banquet spaces. Clearly, we know that we've been shot in the head as far as banqueting is concerned. And on 2 counts. One is that it's not only just international travel that drives business. I think international travel drives corporate business. And that's because that, the guys want trainers. They want people who come from abroad. Then they want to be in a room with 600 people. They want to show their boss that, they've got so many employees. So I think that one part of international travel is gone. And as a result of that, banqueting has just died. But there are socials that happen. Unfortunately for us, the 1,500 persons wedding has now become a 50 people wedding. So we need to scale down, but people are still getting married. It's not that people are not getting married. We've opened on the 8th and we've done 4 weddings at the Conrad already. So it's happening. I think we need how to overcome or how to understand this problem. We need to understand that we are in India. Our per capita income is 11,000 rupees. We are not in New York that has a 70,000 rupee per capita income. So what are the strengths that we have as Indians? We have per capita income of 11,000, but we've got 1.3 billion people. We've got a huge demand of domestic travel. People don't necessarily need to travel out. We've got a huge amount of companies that exist in India, MSMEs, big corporates, who will want to cooperate, who will want to use it, and they might not want to even move out of a Bangalore, for instance. We 80% of our business used to be sort of MICE and MICE related. We feel that has to come back, and it's going to come back by domestic demand. We've got a huge population that sits between 25 and 40. We feel those kids are going to look at this pandemic and say, listen, there's only so much I want to be restricted by this. I want to go out. I want to live my life. I'm prepared to take the risk of getting the virus. I'll deal with it. And so I feel that these people will come out. They will come and eat. They will come and stay. They will come and drive business, hopefully, for us. So I think our focus is now moved, especially with these international brands. It always was a sort of dollar earns hotel model. I think now we're going to really discover that, Indian currency is as good and it pays the bills.
Rahul, I know as the youngest, you're right at the end of the line, but say your piece.
It's always good to learn from everyone on the panel. Of course, they've touched upon on almost all the aspects. So I'll just keep it a little bit short. I think we all agree. And, Nakul Anandji said very interestingly about 2 months back that the future of any business survival and brand is going to be the mantra of QSR. QSR would be quality, safety, and reliability. I think everyone in their operations in one way or the other is already adopting this in order to survive in the short term and long term. The second aspect I would say is in terms of our strategy. We are trying to eliminate the variables to the extent possible. By what I mean is that we have decided that we are going to purely focus on the domestic market, because it's very no one can really predict when the international borders are going to open for any of your inbound markets. It's very unpredictable in terms of how any market is going to respond to the COVID situation in the short and long term. So the only aspect that you have available to you to really work on your strategies is the domestic market. And in terms of, and while obviously my panel members are focusing on India, we believe that in the short run, in the next quarter or 2 quarters, we believe that Nepal will have a lot of influx of tourists coming in from India. And we are flanked by the 2 biggest countries in the world, India and China, that is almost 3 billion people. And people are going to want to come to markets that are going to be less affected by the corona. And that is your markets such as Bhutan, that is markets such as Taiwan, such as Nepal. So we will see a rub off of these markets into Nepal. But our focus is in terms of our global strategy as well, is towards the domestic market. We strongly also believe that our focus, and I think Vineet ji as well as Ashish also mentioned this, that our focus is now on the leisure and wellness sector. I think one important factor that really people focus on is on the wellness sector. And when one of our establishments in Philippines, we've opened the place and we run it like a medical wellness, and it's always full. Since the time we opened, people want to go there because they look at it as a natural quarantine. They are going there and the spaces are available to you, and they're doing everything that one would need in terms of maintaining the social distancing. So that model has definitely worked. And the last aspect I will say is what Vineet ji mentioned is, we have also started focusing on disruption. That means that staycation, we believe, is becoming a big thing now in terms of all the different countries that we are operating in. And accordingly, we are already investing in an application that focuses purely on staycation. So you see, the whole hospitality way of thinking, I believe, is becoming more wider and wider, whereby we have been pushed to a situation whereby you start thinking outside the box and you start looking at other ways to bring in revenues to be able to sustain in the long run and be able to survive. That's how we are looking at the future of this business.
So for my next round of questions, I want to ask you a very interesting question as far as owners are concerned. Now, as owners, you've given your hotels to your operators. But in a condition like this where everybody is in a very bad situation, it's all about survival. How much interference or how do you do the balance between what the operators can do and how much of because it is your money, so how much of it is you going in and trying to do something on your own or helping them out or suggesting them? What is the best kind of symbiotic relationship between the two?
I think, Vikram, I always believe that this whole discussion on owner-operator relationships is kind of stretched. It's not a social relationship, it's a contractual relationship. So it's not decided over conference discussions or coffee tables. It's decided on a piece of contract that 2 extremely credible counterparties have written for each other. So I think that's largely how the contract is governed. 2, please understand that the companies that we work with are extremely credible. They've built reputation over the last several decades. And that's why owners are comfortable signing up with them. Whether it's Vineet or Omar or Rahul or Sanjay or I, we've all signed, repetitively we've signed contracts with these companies. If we felt there was anything wrong in this equation, we would have just stopped at one and not signed multiple contracts. So I do think that it's a bit of a, it's a very romanticized conversation, but not very relevant. I think the two parties work extremely well with each other. Try and understand operators have a job to ensure a certain delivery to the customers. And that's what eventually gives us returns in the long term. Sometimes in the short terms, we may feel switch off the lights, fire people, just save every penny. But we need to also respect the fact that the consistency is what brings customers to the brands, right? So that friction sometimes is very healthy, right? The second, just to kind of cover up everything we've discussed today and several other webinars that I've heard, I've actually never heard so much of discussion for a situation which would definitely be temporary. Now, how do we define temporary? One can argue whether it's 18 months or 2 years or 12 months, but I completely agree with Omar. It's a very far-fetched idea that we are going to plan hoteliering with no restaurants and no banqueting, and people will be worried to step out and have a drink. Yes, there could be an interim issue, whether it's 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. Nobody is going to really pass a judgment on that. But I do think too much has been discussed for something which is going to last 18 months or 24 months. I do feel that hoteliering in India presents tremendous opportunities for future. The demand has always been extremely, extremely healthy. I completely agree with Omar. I was talking to an investor this morning, and I said, thank God for this. Now we're going to be forced to looking at demand sources which always existed, but we never tapped into because we had an easy demand coming from 5 offices who would feed us 200 rooms. Now we may need to go to 50 offices to get access to the same number of rooms, right? But the demand exists. Second, supply. I do think that this epidemic will significantly derail any new supply addition. The capital is becoming very expensive, and therefore a lot of us as existing hotel owners, we can be probably a little more peaceful in our mind that we are going to stabilize our hotels post-COVID in an environment which has very little supply coming in. So I think we need to look a little longer because our assets were not built for 18 months. I think all of us are quite competent to handle. It's painful. It is a tremendous loss of value, no doubts about it, right? I mean, Sanjay runs a public company. He bears the brunt of that, but it's the same for all of us, right? There's a significant erosion of value in the short term, but I don't think we build our hotel assets for 8 months or 18 months. And beyond that, I think you will realize there'll be very different discussions. So I think a lot has been said for 2 years. I'm not really worried in the long term. It's a strong demand supply equilibrium here.
Bikram, connect. I mean, I think I agree with all of what Ashish said. The underlying principle of this partnership with brands, between brands and owners, is that one of true partnership and of in the spirit of alignment of interests. So, if we do well, they do well. If we don't do well, they don't do well. So therefore, their financial interests are aligned with our operating performances. And therefore, we have to keep that spirit of partnership alive at all points of time. Whilst there will be stretches, stretches are good. As long as you have logical, clean conversations between partners, whether they are brands or owners, this works brilliantly well. But beyond that, it gets, if you nitpick too much, it's going to be counterproductive, like Ashish mentioned.
I think, Bikram, we hold relationships more so with management companies quite paramount. Yesterday, we heard of a property getting deflagged in Jaipur. And I was genuinely very upset. And I was speaking to my team and said, this is not, in these times, this is not when you go in for divorce. This is when you guys are meant to be holding each other's hands and helping us through this pandemic and say, listen, let's work this out, because there's really there's no easy way out of this. So what we work with brands, and I think Ashish said this, I think management contracts have been drafted for the last 200 years, and not one contract has a provision for a pandemic like the COVID. I mean, it's unheard of. We never even thought that customers would be in short supply. We just thought there will be a different range of customers. The guy might be price sensitive. The guy might want a different kind of amenity. But we never thought we won't have customers. So I think, that realization is a big realization, and it runs through right down to the lowest echelon of our hoteliers, where these kids come up and say, sir, what's going on? We are here, we want to work, but we never imagined that we'd have no customers to serve. I think, the magnitude of this is very high. Having said that, I think the brands, there are brands who are very sensitive. There are brands, the brands bring to us a certain level of service, they bring operating standards, and they bring to us a great marketing network which we plug into, which is why brands exist. If you take this away, all of us would just be running independent hotels. So there is a core competence the brands bring. That core competence is never going to go away. There is a certain competence we bring in as hoteliers, as owners, as real estate developers, and we build a great product for them, and we hand it over to them like any good marriage and say, listen, look after this child of mine for me, and let's make sure that it blooms and blossoms so both of us benefit. So I think that these management contracts are here to stay. And if anything else, they're going to come out stronger in this pandemic.
Just, if I may just step in here, we wear a owner and an operator's hat. And what we have experienced through the past 3 months is that, both operators and owners have to coexist. And they have to, both are equally important, I believe. And in these times of COVID, as Omar mentioned, contracts are contracts, obviously, and they have the requisite clauses when it comes to the force majeures as well as any unseen circumstances. But based on our experience with the operators that we deal with, I think our discussions have gone over and beyond the existing management contracts. And that is because there were so many variables and so many unexpected situations that one could not really capture that in totality in a management agreement. And that has to be done based on a relationship with the operators itself, because if you really want to run the hotel, you would need the operators on your side to run the hotel. And obviously, we all know that the operators are at the mercy of the owners. Because we are invested in concept hospitality, if an owner now decides that he does not want to open the hotel for whatever reason, we have no choice but to go with that fait accompli. So I strongly believe that in these times, relationships with operators are really important. I think discussions are going way beyond the normal course of discussions on a management contract. And operators are going to be there, owners are going to be there. Both of them need each other in their own ways. And I think that relationship was what is going to drive this whole business forward.
To answer your original question, Bikram, as far as we are concerned, we believe in intervention and not interference as far as operators are concerned. So wherever we feel that we can add value or bring in value, we volunteer to offer that advice to them. But more often than not, it is the operators who reach out to us, seeking intervention, as I might say, not interference. So we don't micromanage at all. And I think our relationship with our operators over the years has gone way beyond the management contract. In fact, we have owned hotels now for close to 14 years, 13 to 14 years. And fortunately, I think there's only been one instance some years ago where we had to actually refer to a management contract. But otherwise, management contracts, according to us, are just signed and kept away. That's about it. And that's the way it should be, I think. I think it's a collaborative effort. Operators bring in their own strengths. That's the reason why we have chosen them in the first place. But there are, however, certain strengths, at least when it comes to international operators, where there's a certain value that a developer and an owner brings in. So I think it's a collaborative effort, symbiotic relationship, and that's the way to continue.
Thank you very much for being part of this panel. Thank you, Sanjay, Vineet, Omar, Rahul, and Ashish. And we hope to meet in better times in person and have a glass of tea or something else and welcome the guests back into the hotels, because that's what we are all hoping for. Fingers crossed. Thank you very much.